Morning. Morning. How's it going? Is this clean? It is clean. Hooray! I did it. Sad news. We aren't making slime and chemistry today. No! After all that? They told you slime was going to be your final and they took it away from you? No. The audacity. I am so sorry. That's not cute. Morning, everybody. Did you hear what happened? You can't tell someone that slime is going to be their final and then take it away. You can't do that. No. I don't like that. That is cruel. I would pass that final with flying colors. Regular chemistry final, maybe not so flying. Maybe just colors. But slime final, I would pass with flying colors. Good morning to you as well. Apparently, if I do Duolingo today, my streak will be 893. That's what Duolingo just told me. 893 days. That's a lot of days. Oh. Oh, a mess. I am a mess this morning, but that's okay. What else? Blah, blah, blah. Hi, Olivia. Why are you guys staying home? Are you guys okay? I had vertigo earlier and she decided to stay home with me. That's so sweet. What a sweet girl. That's a lot of consistency that I do not have in my life. Consistency. Wait, what? I can't get my Wordle streak longer. Oh, for the streak. I have a Wordle streak that is... How long is my Wordle streak? 193 days? Something like that? But my Duolingo streak is one of my prides and joy because it is so long. The Duolingo streak is quite long. I started doing Duolingo the December before I moved to Italy to refresh the Italian that I already knew, and I just haven't stopped since then. Who wants to hear something actually crazy? Not like fake crazy, like actually crazy. My creamy ice cream machine lit on fire yesterday. That's a fact. Lit on fire. I told you it was actual crazy. Lit on fire. In the course of normal use, the little spinny thing got too crazy and it like was rubbing against something in the gears and lit on fire. We messaged them. They're replacing it because apparently it's not just us. If you Google it, apparently this is like an issue. It was fired, yeah. Oh, great. That sounds awful, Alyssa. I'm so sorry. That's way more serious than this. This was not that serious. They're replacing it, so like whatever. Um, that's not good, Alyssa. That's not good. I hate that. I would also keep the kids home. This is much less serious than that. This was just like a mechanical error, not any kind of like devious anything. I'm actually totally fine with mechanical errors. Like, I don't love it, but they're replacing it, so like whatever. Deviant fires different. That's traumatic, Alyssa. I don't even know what to say to that. Ollie's last day of school is tomorrow. That is crazy. I received my shipping number. I said, yes, I got the orders down below 100 outstanding orders last night, which is great. We started yesterday with a lot. I don't remember how many exactly. It was somewhere in the range of 96,000. Just kidding. It was somewhere in the range of like 150 something. And now when I went to bed, I got it down to 99. It put itself out, Becca, because it was touching the ice cream. It was weird. My blow dryer caught on fire when I dried my hair. I was like, my hair, that's insane. Yeah, it was like inside the gear thing, and then I opened it up. Yeah, I couldn't help myself. I totally said 96,000. I opened it up, and the little gear fell into the ice cream, and it put itself out in the ice cream. Yeah, so that's what happened. We purchased a fire extinguisher last night because it was scary. Yeah, bet none of you thought that's what I was going to say when I said, do you want to hear something crazy? You thought I was going to be like, I packed a lot of orders or like something like that. Nope. It was an actual crazy. It is always good to have Jen. I have one in my big house. I just forgot to bring one here. I left it with Mom. Yeah, not cute. Not cute. It was not good. Everyone say good morning to the plants. Here they are, growing too strong, perhaps, a whole jungle even. I grew up Mormon, so you can leave that religion, but not the prep tendencies. You know, that's the one good part about it, though, right? That part, I'm okay with you taking with you, Jen. Like, there are, probably a good idea so she can protect your mugs. That's right. Side note, what are those sponges with the smiley faces called? Those are scrub daddies. Did you find what nightmare friend was living? Yes, she had 20 bug bites on her legs, which by and large was considerably less traumatic than everything I had imagined. 20 bug bites on your legs is a nightmare. Don't get me wrong. She's right. It's a nightmare, but not the same kind of nightmare. You know what I'm saying? Exactly, Becca. That's what she was saying. She was saying, I'm living your nightmare because I am so allergic to mosquito bites that my whole legs would have been swollen and it would have been sad. You're shopping for things for the condo? Oh, that's not. Oh, Anya, there's a huge sale happening on them right now. If you remind me later, I'll link you to it. What caught on fire? My ice cream maker. Yeah. Yeah. Crazy times. Things you don't expect ever. Ever. Okay, so we got a lot of orders to pack today, which means we got to get to it. And I want you all to be proud of me. I have managed to get the previous day's stuff uploaded before book club every day so far. So crazy times. Everything is uploaded except for today's, obviously, because it hasn't happened yet. Yesterday, Bristol went to jail. No, I lied. Bristol didn't go to jail. Bristol went to jail the day before yesterday. Yesterday, Bristol went to trial. I'm not gonna say what happened because you should just listen to it if you didn't listen to it. It was an insane chapter, and I don't really want to give spoilers from it because it was Chris knows what he's doing, you guys. He knows. He is too good at his job. This man, you know what I have to say? I am not a fan of Glee. I did not enjoy watching the little bits of Glee that I watched. So when I heard that Chris Colfer was writing books like this, I was not initially interested. But if being on Glee gave Chris the time and funds to be able to put out things like this and whatever like that for the world, then Glee is worth every second of that trash show, because this is so good. His books and his writing are so good. You know what, Foxy? I've tried those. They don't work for me, unfortunately. Everything was worth it for him to write these, in my opinion. That's what I mean. His name recognition that was, if he didn't have Glee, there's no way that I would have given him an advance that would allow him to just sit and write. Yeah, I still use the toothpaste. That's the only thing that works for me right now is the Dr. whatever toothpaste. But I haven't had bug bites in a long time. I can't remember the last time I had a bug bite, honestly. I've been pretty good. Where we live, there aren't really, there's no bugs here. So I'm okay. But this man was born for this. Yeah, the music from Glee's not a problem. I just didn't enjoy the show personally. Chris is literally on the top rise behind me. Me too. Yeah, I will not, yeah, I would try it, Foxy Roxy, but like, I've tried so many things over my lifetime. And the only thing that's ever worked is this one kind of Dr. something something toothpaste. That makes sense though, Anya. There's a reason for that though, right? You know what I mean? Like, you're watching that for a reason, you know? Anyway, let's read and let's see what's gonna happen to Bristol. I don't know what's gonna happen. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, when they sent her to jail, I thought that Madam Weatherberry was gonna come and get her out of jail. I'd be like, I'm gonna take her to the magic school. Everything's gonna be fine. That is not what happened. That is not what happened. I mean, maybe, Jen. We don't know. Oh, the correctional facility. Yes, you're right. She is going. But, like, I thought she was going to ferry up and fly out. We all had different thoughts of what was going to happen. None of them were correct. Did anyone here guess that she was going to be in the situation? I mean, good Lord. Anyway, this is called Chapter 6, The Bootstrap Correctional Facility for Troubled Young Women. I do not know if that is Madam Weatherberry's school, because Madam Weatherberry's school is not just for women. Oh boy, here we go. By sunrise, Bristol was already so far from Chariot Hills that she couldn't hear the morning cathedral bells. She was shackled in the back of a small carriage that traveled down a long, bumpy road through the northeast plains of the Southern Kingdom. True to its name, there was absolutely nothing to see in the plains but the same flat earth that stretched out for miles around them. With every passing hour, the grassy land became drier and drier, and the sky became grayer and grayer, until the land and sky blended into one dismal color. The driver stopped only rarely to feed the horses, and occasionally the guards let Bristol out of the carriage to relieve herself on the side of the road. Gross. I guess she doesn't have a choice. The only food they gave her was a piece of stale bread, and Bristol was afraid to eat it because she didn't know how long she was supposed to ration it. The driver said nothing about an estimated time of arrival, so as their second day of travel began, she started worrying that their destination didn't exist. Did I miss something? Do I even want to know what I missed? Oh. Yeah. She convinced herself that the carriage would eventually pull over and the drivers would abandon her in the middle of nowhere. Perhaps that's what her father and the High Justice's plan had been all along.
In the late afternoon of their second day, Bristol finally spotted something in the distance that suggested there was civilization nearby. As the carriage moved closer to the object, she saw that it was a wooden sign that pointed down a new path. The Bootstrap Correctional Facility for Troubled Young Women. The carriage turned onto a dirt road, heading in the direction that the sign pointed. Bristol was relieved to see their destination existed, but as the facility appeared on the horizon, she realized being abandoned might have been a better option. Bristol had never laid eyes on such a miserable place, and just the sight of it sucked all the remaining hope and happiness from her body. The Bootstrap Correctional Facility for Troubled Young Women sat on top of the only hill Bristol had ever seen in the Northeast Plains. It was a wide 5-story building made from crumbling bricks. There was a wall where the walls were severely weathered and cracked, and all the windows were tiny, covered in bars, and the glass was mostly shattered. There were gaping holes in the thatched roof and a crooked chimney in the center that made the whole facility look like an enormous, rotting pumpkin.
Oh no, Anya, that stinks. Which ones? Can we replace them? Oh, thank you, Addie. I will be doing that. I'm definitely going to be doing at least my own books. Absolutely. Yes, thank you so much. That's a really lovely compliment, Addie. I appreciate that. Thank you. The building was surrounded by a few acres of parched land, and the property was bordered by a stone wall with sharp spikes along the top. Bristol's carriage stopped at the facility's gate, and the driver whistled for a hunchback gatekeeper who limped out of his small post and removed the barriers. Once the gate was open, the carriage continued down a path that snaked through the facility's grounds. Everywhere she looked, Bristol saw dozens of young women between the ages of about 8 and 17 sprinkled across the property. You guys, I don't think this is Madam Weatherbury's school. I do not think so. Okay, I'll see you in a few. Each girl wore a faded gray and black striped dress and a bandana to keep the hair out of their face and a pair of oversized work boots. All the young women were pale and emaciated and shared the same expression of utter exhaustion, as if they hadn't had a decent meal or a good night's rest in years. It was a haunting sight, and Bristol wondered how long it would be until she, like the other girls, resembled a ghost of her former self. The young women were separated into groups performing various chores. Some fed the chickens in an overcrowded coop, some milked the malnourished cows in a small pen, and some pulled wilted vegetables from a withering garden. However, Bristol didn't understand the point of the other activities she saw the girls performing. Some dug large holes in the ground with shovels, and some moved heavy stones back and forth from one pile to another, and some carried heavy buckets of water around in circles. The girls showed no objections to the pointless exercises and completed their tasks almost mechanically. Bristol assumed that they were trying to avoid the attention from the wardens who were patrolling them. The wardens wore dark uniforms and kept a hand on the whips dangling from their belts as they supervised the young women. As if the facility wasn't grim enough, a peculiar contraption in the middle of the property gave Bristol an uneasy feeling in the pit of her stomach. It appeared to be a large stone well, but instead of a water bucket hanging from its roof, there was a thick wooden board with 3 holes, the perfect sizes to fit around someone's wrists and neck. Whatever it was, Bristol hoped she would avoid the mechanism during her time at the facility. The carriage stopped at the building's entrance, and the driver and the guards pulled Bristol out of the back, and she shrieked because the air was much colder than she had anticipated. The front door slowly opened from inside, the rusty hinges screeching like animals in pain, and a man and woman stepped out to greet the newcomer. A meeting that could have been an email, I tell you what. Good morning, Zinni. The man was short and shaped like an upside-down pear. He had an incredibly wide head and a very thick neck, and a torso that narrowed as it lowered into a tiny waist. He was a sharp dresser and wore a red bow tie with a blue suit that was perfectly tailored to his awkward measurements. His mouth was curled into a devious grin that never faded. The woman beside him was shaped like a cucumber. She was
sorry, that shouldn't have made me laugh that hard. I've never heard anyone described as a cucumber before. But I can see it. I know what this person looks like. It's a great descriptor. She looks like a cucumber. Okay, sorry. My bad. The woman beside him was shaped like a cucumber. She was almost twice as tall as him, and she was the exact same width from head to toe. She looked more conservative than the man and wore a black dress with a high lacy collar. A permanent frown was frozen on her face like she had never laughed in her entire life. Today's your birthday, Cindy? Wait, really? Oh, I guess we did do your thing early so that you wouldn't have it melt in shipping, right? Happy birthday, Cindy. We love you so much. Oh my goodness. Well, happy birthday. Welcome to the Cucumber Live for Cindy's birthday, where we describe people as cucumbers. Guess who's not shaped like a cucumber? Cindy. Okay. Let's keep going. May we help you? The man asked in a deep and raspy voice. Are you the Mr. and Mrs. Edgar, the administrators of this facility? The driver asked. Yes, that's us, the woman said in a sharp and nasally voice. By order of the High Justice Montclair of Chariot Hills, Miss Bristol Lynn Evergreen has been sentenced to live at your facility until further notice, one of the guards informed them. He handed the man a scroll with the official order in writing. Mr. Edgar read over the document and then eyed Bristol like he had won a prize. My, he said. Miss Evergreen must have done something very naughty for the High Justice to sentence her personally. Of course we would be delighted to have her join us. Well, then she's all yours, the driver said. The guards unlocked Bristol's shackles and shoved her toward the administrators. Without missing a beat, the guards and the drivers returned to the carriage and raced away from the facility. Mr. and Mrs. Edgar looked Bristol up and down like two dogs inspecting a steak. Let me be the first to warn you, dearie. This is the house of the Lord, Mrs. Edgar said in a spiteful tone. If you know what's good for you, you'll leave your debauchery at the door. You must be tired and hungry from your journey, Mr. Edgar said in a friendly manner that Bristol didn't trust. You're just in luck. It's near dinner time. Come inside and we'll get you changed into something more appropriate. Mr. Edgar placed a hand on the back of Bristol's neck. The couple escorted her inside, and the interior of the Bootstrap Correctional Facility was just as cold and battered as the outside. The floor was made of rotting wood planks, and the ceiling was stained from leaks, and the walls were covered in dents and scrapes. The administrators moved Bristol down a corridor and through a large archway into a spacious dining hall. The dining hall had 3 long tables that stretched the entire length of the room, and a small table at the front for faculty members. More young women faded, gray and black striped dresses were seated at the long tables and hard at work sewing pieces of leather boots together. Just like the girls outside, the young women in the dining hall were gaunt and fatigued. Their fingertips were bruised and bleeding from being forced to work with dull needles. Additionally, wardens paced the hall as they inspected the girls' work, and they backhanded some of the young women who weren't sewing fast enough to their satisfaction. At the front of the room, hanging above the smaller table, was an enormous banner with a message that made Crystal's blood boil. Good girls do what they're told, and they never ask questions. Good girls finish their work, and they never take breaks. Good girls keep their heads down and never look for trouble. Good girls are always truthful and never tell lies. Good girls know their place and never show disrespect. Good girls are grateful and never want more. Before Bristol could comment on the infuriating message, the administrators pushed her up a rickety staircase at the back of the dining hall. Mrs. Edgar unlocked a heavy barred door, and the couple moved Bristol into their office at the top of the stairs. Unlike the rest of the facility, the Edgar's office was very elegant. It had carpeted floors and a crystal chandelier, and the walls were painted with murals of beautiful landscapes. The office had large windows that peered into the dining hall and the facility's grounds. It was the perfect place to spy on the young women as they worked. Mr. Edgar took a seat in the leather chair behind a cherry wood desk. Mrs. Edgar pulled Bristol behind a privacy screen in the corner of the office and had her remove the clothes and shoes that she arrived in. Guys, this sounds oddly familiar. Do we call Paris? She tossed Bristol's things into the wastebasket and crossed into a bulky wardrobe on the other side of the room. The woman opened the drawers and selected a faded gray and black striped dress, a bandana, and a pair of work boots. "Here," she said, and handed them to Bristol. "Get dressed!" Bristol had nothing on but her undergarments and was freezing, so she put on the new clothes as fast as she could. Unfortunately, the uniform wasn't nearly as warm as her old clothes, and Bristol shivered in the cold room. Ma'am, may I please have a sweater?" "Does this look like a boutique to you?" Mrs. Edgar snapped. "The cold is good for you. It makes you seek the warmth of the Lord." She sat Bristol in the chair across from her husband. His devilish grin grew as he watched Bristol shiver and his double chin turned into 4. "Miss Evergreen, allow me to officially welcome you to the Bootstrap Correctional Facility for Troubled Young Women," Mr. Edgar said. "Do you know why the High Justice has placed you under our care?" They said you're supposed to cure me," Bristol said. "Indeed," he said. "You see, there's something inside you that shouldn't be there. What may seem like a talent or a gift is actually an illness that must be remedied immediately. My wife and I created this facility so we could help girls with your condition. With some hard work and prayer, we'll root out all the unnatural qualities you possess, and nothing will prevent you from becoming a respectable wife and mother one day." "I don't understand how manual labor and prayer are going to cure anyone," she said. Mr. Edgar let out a low, rattling laugh and shook his head. "Our methods may seem tedious and grueling, but they are the most effective tools for treatment," he explained. "You are infected with a horrible disease. It's a sickness of the spirit that the Lord himself opposes. It's going to take time and effort to destroy it. However, with dedication and discipline, we can crush the very source of your symptoms. Our facility will starve the evil from your soul and pump the darkness out of your heart and drain the wickedness from your mind." Bristol knew that it was in her best interest just to stay silent and nod, but every word out of Mr. Edgar's mouth was infuriating her more than less. "Mr. Edgar, you agree that the Lord is all-knowing and all-powerful and the sole creator of existence, correct?" she asked. "Without question," Mr. Edgar replied. "Then why would the Lord create magic if he hates it so much?" she asked. "It's a little counterproductive, don't you think?" Mr. Edgar went quiet, and it took him a few moments to answer her. "To test the loyalty of our souls, of course," he declared. "The Lord wants to separate the people who seek salvation from the people who surrender to sin. By willingly making sacrifices to overcome your condition, you are proving your devotion to the Lord and his beloved Southern Kingdom." "But if the Lord wants to identify those who willingly overcome magic, aren't you interfering by forcing young girls to overcome it?" Her second question was even more befuddling than the first. Mr. Edgar became flustered, and his cheeks were the same color as his bow tie. His eyes darted between Bristol and his wife as he composed a response. "Of course not," he said. "Magic is an unholy manipulation of nature, and no one should manipulate the Lord's beautiful world himself. He smiles upon the people who try to stop such abominations." "But you're trying to manipulate me. Isn't that also an abomination?" Bristol asked. Mr. and Mrs. Edgar gasped. They had never been accused of such a thing. Bristol knew she should stop while she was ahead, but she couldn't stomach any more hypocrisy. She was going to speak her mind whether the administrators liked it or not. "How dare you!" Mr. Edgar exclaimed. "My wife and I have devoted our lives to the Lord's work." "Yeah, but what if you're wrong about the Lord?" she argued. What if the Lord is much kinder and loving than you're giving him credit for? What if the Lord invented magic so that people could help each other and enrich their own lives? What if the Lord thinks you're the unholy ones for abusing people and making them believe that their existence is a whack? Mrs. Edgar slapped Bristol so hard that her whole head jerked in a different direction. Me too, Jen. Me too. You disrespectful little beast, Mrs. Edgar said. You will bite your tongue or I will have it removed. Is that understood? Bristol nodded as blood dripped from the corner of her mouth. Mr. Edgar leaned back in his chair and stared at Bristol like she was a wild animal that he was excited to tame. You have a long road ahead of you, Miss Evergreen, he said. I'm looking forward to watching your progress. A loud gong sounded through the facility. Ah! Time for dinner, Mr. Edgar said. You may join the other girls in the dining hall. Try to get some rest tonight. Tomorrow's going to be a very, very long day for you. This book is called A Tale of Magic. Yeah, it's great. Mrs. Edgar raised Bristol onto her feet and walked her to the door and gave her a shove down the rickety staircase. At the announcement of dinner, the young women sewing boots in the dining hall put away their work. The girls filed in from outside and joined the others at the table. Bristol didn't know where to sit, so she took the first empty seat she could find. None of the girls noticed the newcomer in their presence. In fact, none of the girls said a word or shifted their focus from whatever was directly ahead of them. Despite Bristol's attempts to introduce herself, the young women remained silent and still as statues. Mr. and Mrs. Edgar sat in throne-like chairs at the faculty table and were joined by the wardens and hunchback gatekeeper. Once they were seated, a group of young women with aprons over their gray and black striped dresses entered from the kitchen and served the faculty members roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and baked vegetables. The delicious aroma reminded Bristol of how hungry she was, and her stomach growled like a neglected pet. After the faculty's plates were full, the young women were sent table by table to line up at a serving cart for their own supper. Bristol was handed a crusty bowl full of chunky brown stew that bubbled and smelled like skunk. It took every ounce of willpower not to gag at the revolting food. She followed the line back to her table where the young women stood at their seats until all the girls in the hall were served. While they waited, Bristol's eyes fell on a girl a few seats down from her. She was the smallest girl in the dining hall, and she couldn't have been older than 6 or 7. She had big brown eyes and a tiny button nose and a very short, choppy haircut. Unlike the other girls, the little girl sensed Bristol's gaze and turned to her. At first, Bristol was taken aback by the acknowledgement but didn't know what to do. Hello, she whispered with a smile. What's your name? The little girl didn't respond and just stared at Bristol with blank eyes as if her body was deprived of a soul. My name's Bristol, Bristol said. Today's my first day. How long have you... Their one-sided conversation was interrupted when Mr. Edgar pounded his fist on the faculty table. All the young women had finally returned to their seats, and the administrator rose from his chair to address the room. It's time for the evening prayer, he said. Begin. Bristol didn't know the young women could speak, but to her surprise, they followed Mr. Edgar's command and recited a prayer in perfect unison. To our Lord in heaven, we send our daily thanks for the meal we're about to receive. May it nourish our bodies so we may continue the work of our hands and the work of our hearts. May you bless us with wisdom to recognize our faults, the strength to fix what's broken inside us, and the guidance to stray from our unnatural temptations. In the name of the Southern Kingdom, we pray. Amen. When the prayer was finished, the girls took their seats and devoured the brown stew like they'd never eaten before. Bristol couldn't remember the last time she was so hungry, but she couldn't even touch the food. The daily blessing had made her too angry to eat. Even her worst nightmare had never imagined a place as terrible as this, and as far as she knew, she would be stuck here for a very, very long time. Bristol's room at the Bootstrap Correctional Facility was the size of a closet, but that was the least of her worries. Shortly after dinner, 2 wardens escorted her to a small chamber on the 5th floor and locked her behind a sliding barred door. As the temperature dropped overnight, Bristol had nothing but a thin, raggedy blanket to keep her warm. She had never been so cold in her entire life, and she shivered so hard that her cot was practically vibrating. Her jaw rattled with such intensity that her teeth sounded like horse hooves against pavement. Around midnight, Bristol was distracted from the cold by the strange sensation of being watched. When she looked up, she was startled to see that the little girl with the short, choppy hair was standing behind the bars of her door. The little girl stared at her just as blankly as she had at dinner and carried a folded wooden blanket. Hello, Bristol said, wondering how long the little girl had been standing there. Can I help you? Pip, she said. The little girl was confused and sat up. The little girl said. Bristol was confused and sat up to get a better look at the odd girl. Excuse me? She said. It's Pip, the little girl repeated. I'm so sorry. I don't understand what you're saying, Bristol apologized. Does that mean something in another language? Didn't you ask me what my name was? The little girl said. It's Pip. Oh, that's right, Bristol recalled. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, Pip. Is there a reason you're giving me your name so late? Pip shrugged. Not really, she said. I just finally remembered it. The little girl's distant gaze never changed, but there was an innocence about her that Bristol found charming. Do you have a last name, Pip? The little girl looked at the floor and her shoulders sank. Remembering her first name was such a challenge, she hadn't prepared for more questions. Wait, I do! It's Squeak! Pip Squeak! Pip Squeak? Bristol was surprised to hear. Is that your real name? Well, it's the only name I remember being called, Pip said with a shrug. And again, I don't have many memories from before I lived here. How long have you been here? Bristol asked. Well, about 6 years, I think. You've been here that long? Well, I was just a toddler when I arrived, Pip said. My parents brought me here as soon as they realized I was different, and I started showing signs pretty early. You mean signs of magic? Bristol asked. You were doing magic when you were a toddler? Mm-hmm, Pip said. Still can, too. Want me to show you some? Please, Bristol said without hesitation. The little girl looked up and down the hall to make sure that they were alone. When she'd seen the coast was clear, Pip stretched out her neck and limbs and then pressed her head against the barred door. Bristol watched in amazement as slowly but surely the little girl squeezed through the bars like her body was made of clay. Once she was on the other side, Pip's body snapped back to its original shape. That is unbelievable, Bristol exclaimed, forgetting to keep her voice down. You've been doing that since you were a baby? Oh, I used to squeeze through the rails of my crib. Bristol laughed. I guess that explains how you got out of your room tonight. Mm-hmm. I sneak out all the time, Pip said. Oh, that reminds me. I came to bring you this. I could hear you shivering from my room, so I snuck into the Edgar's linen closet to get you an extra blanket. She wrapped the blanket around Bristol's shoulder. Bristol was extremely touched by Pip's gesture, but she was also extremely cold and had no trouble accepting it. That's really kind of you, she said. Are you sure you don't need it? Oh, no, I'm used to the cold, Pip said. Although it's getting a lot colder lately. It usually starts warming up by this time of year, but I overheard Mr. Edgar saying there's a really bad blizzard in the Northern Kingdom. We're not too far from the border, so let's hope the storm doesn't get any closer. Yeah, let's hope, Bristol said. I don't think I could manage anything colder than this. It rarely snows in Chariot Hills. Oh, what's Chariot Hills? Pip asked. Bristol was shocked that she had never heard of the city before, but then reminded herself that Pip didn't even know her own real name. Oh, it's the city where I'm from, she explained. Oh, Pip said. I'm sorry, I don't get out much. Well, never, actually. What's Chariot Hills like? Well, it's big and it's busy, Bristol described it. There's a town square with a courthouse and a cathedral and a law university. It's also the capital city of the Southern Kingdom, and it's where the king lives with the royal family. You're from the same place as the royal family? Pip asked. How did a girl like you end up here? Well, same as you. I got caught doing magic, Bristol said. I didn't even know I was capable of magic until a week ago. And then I found a book called The Truth of Magic in a library that I worked at, and there was an ancient incantation in the book to test whether or not someone had magic in their blood. And then I was stupid enough to read it aloud, and well, now I'm here. What happened when you read it? Well, the first time I covered the room with flowers. The second time I filled the room with thousands of lights and made it look like the universe. Pip's large eyes grew even larger.
That's amazing! I've never met anyone who could do anything like that before. Most of the girls were just having little tricks like mine. The girl down the hall from my room can grow her hair at will. A girl on the second floor can stand on the water without sinking. And I've seen one girl talk to cows outside. But that might not be magic. She might just be weird. You must be really powerful if you can cover a whole room in flowers and lights.
Bristol had never thought about it like that before. You really think so? She asked. I've never had anything to compare it to. Your magic is the only magic I've ever seen besides my own, and I'm glad Mr. and Mrs. Edgar haven't drained you of it yet.
Don't worry. Their treatments don't actually cure magic,
Pip said.
This facility is just a front for the Edgar family business. It's really a boot factory before Mr. Edgar inherited the name Bootstrap. The only reason he and his wife turned it into a correctional facility was to get free labor out of young girls. At least, that's what I heard the gatekeeper say. He's also an aspiring poet, but that's a different story. It's funny how much you learn when no one thinks you're listening.
The Edgars are such terrible people, Bristol said, and they have the nerve to say we're the simple ones. Suddenly, both girls jumped at the sounds of footsteps echoing from a few floors below. Who is that? Bristol asked.
No, it's the wardens. They're making their nightly rounds, Pip said. I should get back to my room before they reach our floor.
Wait, don't forget this. Bristol removed the blanket from her shoulders and tried to hand it back, but Pip wouldn't take it.
No, you can keep it for the night, she said, but I'll have to collect it early in the morning and return it to the closet before Mrs. Edgar wakes up. She caught me sneaking out of my room last week and chopped off all my hair as punishment. If it happens again, they'll put me in the dunker for sure.
What's the dunker? Bristol asked.
Oh, when girls misbehave, like really misbehave, they strap them outside and they get dunked in cold water until Mr. Edgar thinks they've learned their lesson. Sometimes it takes hours to learn your lesson.
Bristol couldn't believe her ears. This place gets more dreadful by the minute, she said. How have you survived it for so long?
I guess it could be worse,
Bristol said. Pip said. How? Bristol asked.
Oh, I don't actually know how it could be worse, she said. I just haven't been many places to compare it to. None, actually.
Yeah, well, it certainly is the worst place I've ever been to, Bristol said. But I'm grateful that I met someone as kind as you. Let's break out of here one day and move someplace warm where we can see the ocean. What do you say? Bristol knew that the thought intrigued Pip because the corners of her mouth began to twitch and they slowly curved into a smile, possibly the first smile she had ever had.
It's a nice thought to fall asleep to, she said. Good night, Bristol.
Pip squeezed through the bars and snuck back to her room before the wardens could reach the 5th floor. Bristol laid back down on her cot and tried her best to sleep. She was still cold, even with the second blanket, but she shivered a lot less thanks to the warmth of her new friend. Bristol thought working at the library was strenuous, but it was nothing compared to her first days at the Bootstrap Correctional Facility. Every morning at dawn, the wardens unlocked the young women from their rooms and rushed them through grotesque breakfast in the dining hall and then forced them to complete chores until dinner. The tasks were brutal on Bristol's body. With every passing hour, she didn't know how she would get through the next, but she didn't have a choice. By the end of her first week, her faded gray and black striped dress was much looser than it had been the first day she put it on. The most challenging part of all was keeping the frustration from surfacing on her face. Otherwise, she would meet the wrath of the wardens. Occasionally, Bristol would get the eerie sense that she was being watched by more than just the wardens. She looked up to see Mr. Edgar glaring down at her from his office, delighted to see how much she was struggling. By the end of each day, Bristol's body ached so much that she didn't even notice the freezing temperature. Pip was kind enough to sneak her a blanket each night after the Edgars went to bed, and then she promptly returned the blanket the next morning before they woke. Bristol hated that Pip was risking getting caught for her sake, but their nightly visits were all she had to look forward to. Their daydreams about escaping the facility and moving to the coast were the only things keeping her going. She didn't know how she would survive without them. One night, Pip didn't show up and Bristol became concerned. Her friend had spent the day digging holes in the yard, and Bristol hoped that she was just too tired to sneak out of her room. The following morning, she waited for breakfast to be served, and Bristol's concerns skyrocketed because she didn't see Pip anywhere in the dining hall. She strained her neck to try to spot her friend's choppy hair amongst the bandanas, but Pip was gone. Just then, Mr. and Mrs. Edgar emerged from their office, slamming the heavy door behind them. They marched down the rickety steps in a huff, causing the staircase to sway beneath them, and then proceeded to the front of the hall. Yeah, she needs a bliss worm. Breakfast has been canceled this morning, Mr. Edgar announced. Bristol sighed and slumped in her seat. She had become dependent on the nauseating meals, but she was the only girl at her table who was affected by the news. The others remained as motionless and expressionless as always.
Something very troubling occurred late last night, Mr. Edgar went on. While my wife and I slept, the wardens caught a young lady stealing our private property. As you know, thievery is an unforgivable sin in the eyes of the Lord, and it will not be tolerated under this roof. We must make an example out of the thief so the Lord does not think we deserted him. Bring her in!
At his signal, Bristol watched in horror as the wardens pushed Pip into the dining hall. Her hands were tied behind her back, and her large eyes were more distant than normal, like her mind had abandoned her body out of fear. The wardens moved her to the front of the room beside Mr. Edgar, and the administrators walked in circles around Pip as he questioned the small girl.
Tell the other girls what you did, he ordered.
I took a blanket from the linen closet.
Pip confessed.
And why would you do such a wicked thing?
Mr. Edgar asked.
I was cold,
she said. Pip looked up, and her eyes immediately found Bristol in the crowd. Watching her friend lie on her behalf made Bristol sick to her stomach. She had to do something to save Pip, but she didn't know how to help her.
And what do we say about the cold?
Mr. Edgar asked.
You say the cold is good for us?
Pip recited.
It makes us seek the warmth of the Lord.
Precisely, Mr. Edgar said, but you weren't interested in the warmth of the Lord last night. All you cared about was yourself. So you abandoned the Lord and resorted to sin to satisfy your physical desires. And what do we do with sinners in this facility?
We cleanse them?
Pip said.
Exactly, he replied, and
returned to the rest of the room.
To ensure none of you follows in her footsteps, you will join us outside and watch this thief being punished for her shameful actions. Take her to the dunk tank.
The name of the horrible device sparked a wave of fear through the young women in the dining hall. It was the only reaction Bristol had seen the girls have since she arrived. Their mouths dropped open as they looked at one another with wide, frightful eyes. The wardens grabbed Pip by the arms and headed out of the hall, but Bristol jumped in front of them and blocked the path. "Wait!" she screamed. "This is my fault. Pip did nothing wrong."
Stand aside, you reckless little worm.
Wrong voice.
Stand aside, you reckless little worm!
Mrs. Edgar yelled.
This girl was caught red-handed while you were in your room.
No, it was me, Bristol declared. I put her under a spell, and I bewitched her into stealing the blanket. Punish me and let her go.
Liar, Mr. Edgar shouted. No one in this facility has that kind of power. Now stand aside or you'll...
I can prove it, Bristol yelled. Alasoon, Alakun, Alakune, Delmoon, Dalmoon, Alkatoon, Alkamam. The ancient incantation echoed through the dining hall, and for a few intense moments, the administrators looked around in terror, but nothing appeared. Bristol wondered if she had mispronounced the text. Because the spell was taking longer than it had at the library, Mr. and Mrs. Edgar began to laugh at her attempt to sidetrack them.
You foolish girl, Mr. Edgar sneered. We'll deal with you later. Now, wardens, take the little one outside and strap her to the...
Suddenly, Mr. Edgar was distracted by screeching. The noise grew louder and louder like thunder of an approaching storm. To everyone's astonishment, a flock of colorful birds burst through the windows and soared into the dining hall, causing the room to erupt in panic. The birds circled Bristol like a tornado and then lunged at the faculty members, knocking the wardens and the administrators off their feet. Next, the flock flew to the front of the room and attacked the banner hanging above the faculty table, ripping it apart with their claws and beaks. And by the time they finished, the banner was almost completely shredded. Only 5 words of its oppressive message remained. Good girls always want more. Once they finished with the banner, the birds flew out of the window, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. The dining hall froze for an entire minute of uninterrupted shock. Finally, the silence was broken when Mr. Edgar let out a mortifying scream and pointed at Bristol.
Take that heathen to the dunker,
he commanded. Before she could fully comprehend what was happening, the warden seized Bristol and dragged her outside. The entire facility followed them to the dunker and gathered around it. The wardens fastened the contraption's wooden board around Bristol's neck and wrists and then hoisted her above the deep well. Her feet were dangling above the icy water. The suspension was incredibly painful, and Bristol could barely breathe.
Drop her on my signal, Mr. Edgar ordered. 1, 2.
Bristol braced herself to meet the freezing water below, but oddly, Mr. Edgar never gave the wardens his signal. For a second, Bristol thought the flock of birds had returned because Mr. and Mrs. Edgar went stiff and stared into the horizon in bewilderment. Soon, the property was filled with the sounds of galloping hooves, and the spectators around the well turned to see what the Edgars were gawking at. On the outer road, a golden carriage raced toward the facility at an unprecedented speed. It was pulled by 4 large horses with long magenta manes, and there was no driver steering the magnificent steeds. As the carriage approached, Bristol realized the creatures weren't horses at all, but unicorns with silver horns. The carriage reached the facility and the gate unlocked and swung open on its own without the help of the gatekeeper. The unicorns slowed down as they trotted through the property and came to a stop directly in front of the dunker. The carriage door opened and its sole passenger stepped out. She was a beautiful woman with dark hair and bright eyes, and she wore a vibrant purple gown, a stylish fascinator, and 1 glove on her left arm. The woman observed the facility with a judgmental gaze.
So this is where the gloom comes from,
she said. No one said a word to the woman. All the faculty members and young women remained very still, staring at the unicorns in disbelief, like they were all experiencing some kind of hallucination.
Well, you're a very talkative bunch, said the woman. Then again, there isn't much to talk about around these parts, is there? Am I right to assume this is the Bootstrap Correctional Facility?
Who might you be?
Mr. Edgar exclaimed.
Oh, forgive my manners,
The woman said with a cheerful smile.
I am Madam Weatherberry. I'm looking for Bristol Evergreen.
How do we live through this? What are we going to do when this series is over? We cried when the last one ends. What are we going to do now? We're so invested. He just keeps taking us deeper and deeper into this world. Is this how normal people feel about the ACOTAR universe? Because I read that and I'm not that invested. But this I am invested. If they don't get Pip out of there with them, we're going to burn it to the ground. We ride at dawn. That's all I'm going to say. We ride at dawn. Okay. I have to go pack orders because that's literally my job. Yes. Yes, that's correct. We will stage a riot. So I'm going to go pack those orders. And tomorrow, I guess we find out. I don't know. We keep thinking we're going to find out. And then, like, you guys, like, I really thought that we were going to get the school right away because the prologue talked about the school. Y'all, we're on chapter 7 and we haven't seen the school yet. So, like, let's go. Let's go, Weatherberry. Chip chop. Not that I'm not enjoying it, but like it's getting stressful. Yeah, right. Seriously, stressed right here. Stressed. Okay. Yes, that's true. I am leaving for a couple of days, so we will have a short break. But it's yes, I know. I was working at 2 a.m. It's true. Yeah. Well, like 1 a.m. I was in bed before 2 a.m. But I guess it was 2 a.m. your time. Yeah. I'm hoping. So my goal for today is to get at least 3/4 of the remaining orders done. Hey, Abby. Abby, I packed your slime yesterday. You should have an email. I recognize your name. My goal for today is to get at least 3/4 of the orders mailed out, and then the rest tomorrow. That's my goal, so that then the next day I can do the roll for slimes from tomorrow. Because tomorrow we have, remember, you guys, in case you don't remember, we have Avalanches After Dark tomorrow. I'm gonna go do that right now, Cindy. I forgot to do that. I'll put them in like a little side pouch. I forgot to. Will you message me right now, Cindy? And I'll put them in like a little side thing. If I do my roll RDS, can my order go with that? If it fits, yeah. Yeah, if it fits, sure. I don't see why not. All right, I will see you all later. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Yeah, I knew you meant roll for slime, Priscilla. Don't stress. But yes, it can go together. Yeah. If it fits in the same package, we'll see. I always tell everyone I'll combine them if it makes sense. Sometimes it's actually cheaper to split packages into 2 priority mailers, because 2 priority mailers is about $17, and then sometimes a big box is more than $17, so then it's cheaper just to use 2 priority mailers, you know what I mean? Because priority mailers don't count on weight. Yeah, you should, Naisa. I do not know if I will be live later because I have a lot of orders to pack, but I will for sure be live tomorrow night for Avalanches After Dark. So that is the sitch. That live will answer all my questions for the B-Day slime. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely it will. Okay, I will see you all either later or tomorrow morning, whichever. I love you. Have a great day. Until then, bye-bye.